Welcome to the Social Media Breakfast of Houston. And for those of you who came through the ring, thank you so much for being here. And for those of you who are watching online, thank you also for joining us. I'm so excited about our guest today. I know you're going to learn so much from him, and I'm very excited to introduce him to you. But before I do, let me just remind you that next month is the Gift of Guidance here at the Impact Hub. We are still looking for table leaders, and we're looking for scribes. That means people that will help our nonprofits with their social media strategy for next year. Even if you don't feel like you're super talented at that, let us know you want to come, because we need people to sit around the tables and brainstorm with these nonprofits. We're still looking for volunteers for that. So if you're that, make sure you raise your hand in the chat. Definitely let us know there. And one of my team will get back to you with a link where you can sign up. Okay, does that sound good? Okay, great. Awesome. And that is what we're going to do. So with no other further ado, I'm going to turn my attention to John Pacini. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great. I'm happy to be here. It's been about a decade, I think, since I've sat in the chair and talked to you.
Yes, at the black table.
Yes.
Yes. So I'm so excited that you're here, because I feel like that the world of influencer marketing has changed so much in just the last couple of years with everything that's happened with pandemic and so on. We have really moved into a different kind of a world when it comes to that. You've been doing this. We were talking about when we started into this kind of work back in the early aughts, so
2 decades.
Yes, 2 decades of this. And so I'm really excited to hear from you how things are changing, what's going on. But first of all, let's start with Mom Media. Let's start with Mom 2 Summit, which is your bread and butter. How I got to know you is that you started this little conference called Mom 2.0. I don't know, when was the date? When did you do that?
The first one was early 2009.
Okay,
so, yeah.
So early 2009, Mom 2.0. I think I came to that one. Or one of them in that early age. And it was like amazing, because all of these influencers, mostly parenting bloggers at the time, came together to talk about how they're going to do their craft better. And what made you come up with that idea?
So we had been working in the online parenting space for about 3 or 4 years at that point. And what we found, this was pre-Facebook being open to the pre-Facebook at all, and then pre-Facebook being open to the general public, pre-Twitter, the social media environment that we know today didn't exist. And so really it was mom bloggers. And primarily, if you looked at the kind of the top end of the demographic curve, of the bell curve at the time, it was primarily Gen X mom bloggers telling their stories in a very authentic way, in a very Gen X sort of, a lot of dry humor that persists in the social web today, and telling it authentically. And there was an early organization that we remember called Blog Her. It's still around in a certain form, but they started having events and bringing people together. But it really was more of kind of a trade show environment. It helped people on board who were interested in telling their stories. But what started to bubble to the surface was a group of just a handful of women who were, and a few men, but mostly women, who had developed these blogs that had achieved commercial level audiences that were larger than commercial media was getting, larger than most brands were getting with their best possible work they were putting out. And so and then they were getting different offers and questions and inquiries and mommy blogger jabs, and they just didn't know what to make of it. So we said, listen, there's an opportunity here. I was working already in a different project in the mom online space with my wife Carrie, and we knew our friend Laura Mays, who was also in the space, and so we got together with a few other very smart people and said, let's host a conversation, a moms, marketers, and media conversation, get everybody together and figure this out together. And so we had 200 seats. It was in Houston. Not a resort destination. We love Houston, but people came from all over the world and all over the United States. And it was an unbelievable group of women in that room, just, and all looking at each other like, I found my people. And so from there, the Mom 2.0 community launched. And a few years later, we launched Dad 2.0, which was a dad influencer community. Thank you. And we, from that process on, this community was developed that has today become the longest running farthest reaching and largest parent influencer community in North America. So it's been a wonderful run, and we really are always there to serve the community. We always talk about it as an ecosystem where the brands and the creators come together. Not all of them use the term influencer, but the brands and the creators and the traditional media come together in sort of a safe space to learn, connect, network, build relationships, make deals, and kind of set the agenda for where the industry is going. And about, I don't know, 5 or 6 years ago, I get lost with the pandemic years that were just vanished from our lives. But several years into the teens, Money Magazine wrote an article that credited the Mom 2.0 community with having really, pun intended, birthed the modern influencer, now $21 billion a year influencer industry.
That's amazing. And that's one of the things that from the very beginning you guys did so well, you and Carrie and Laura, is that you brought in mainstream media, you brought in brands, like very well-known brands, to interface with this community, which I think is part of why it grew so fast and so well, because you weren't just dealing with, the influencers or the creators, you also had the creators, you were working with the brands, and you were also working with the media. So kind of how did you run that?
Well, no, you really can't have, they all have to exist together, right? Because it's all part of the same amplification ecosystem. So you have to have brands who understand how to work with creators in an authentic way, and are guided in that process. And you have to also find creators who understand how to operate professionally as a business, if they're holding themselves out as a business, how to professionally run their platform. And you need the understanding and engagement of media who doesn't see it as competitive and sees it as really something that they can benefit from in their own goals of having to put content out 24/7, right? So that's, if you understand what motivates, and this is, as I think a lot of businesses could relate to this, when you understand what motivates all the players in the ecosystem and you serve those motivations, you can have great success.
Yeah, and thank you for saying that, because I think some people think if you're not a big brand that you can't have this kind of a creator relationship. And I think that that's something that is sort of a myth, if you will. And so I wanted to kind of uncover that today a little bit and talk to those of us who, and you may be part of a big brand, and if you are, hi, welcome. But if you are just a smaller company, realize that how you can work with influencers as well, to amplify your messages, as well as make what I call authentic conversations. And I think with AI coming on board, so there's a lot of things I want to talk to you today about, with AI coming on board and a bunch of other things like that, like where are we going to find these authentic conversations? Well, this may be part of the answer.
Yeah, I'll take a half step back to your question or your comment about large brands versus small brands, right? So we've worked with both. We've worked with Unilever, Dove, Amazon, Apple, Google, Facebook. We've worked with
the White House. We'll get there.
The White House, yeah. And so we've worked with very, very large organizations, but we've worked with startups too. We worked with Smarty Pants Vitamins, who many people know now, going back a decade or so, and when they were basically just launching, and they built their parent influencer, parent creator relationships initially through our network, and then just launched and grew it from there with really, really authentic talk, real engagement, and real partnerships. And so you can build it from the bottom up. I think for the large organizations, it's I don't want to say top down or kind of a descaling of it, but what you need to do if you're a large brand is, and you want to be able to have a real valuable long-term asset in your influencer relationships, is you have to come down to a human level. And that's what we've really encouraged over the years with our live events. And the virtual events that we do as well, we try to keep as intimate as possible so they don't feel impersonal. But the in-person events, right, like the people in the room here, and people getting together at various meetups and at our annual conferences and whatnot, that's where you build, as humans, this is how we work. That's how you build those relationships that will really, really power and support your brand. And we've seen big brands who have had, who have been with us year over year over year, who have had PR crises, right?
Oh,
People always think about it in
Yeah.
terms of, oh, we have this new product we want to launch, we have a big moment we want to announce, but when things go wrong and you're on the phone with the brand manager at 7 a.m. on a Sunday morning because something went down that was just a bad PR, snafu, and you find that there is this community that with no pay supports you, that it becomes a net that catches the brand, that's incredibly powerful.
And it's absolutely priceless. And so I've
Right.
seen that too with some of my clients as well. This has happened 100%. And I think that is the most important thing to think about, because people think about hiring an influencer and just getting something out of them, like of an Instagram post or whatever. And that is not really what you do.
Yeah, no, I would say that, and this is something I talk to our clients and when I speak, and we talk about a lot, is that the transactional nature of influencer or creator relationships is something that is of the past, or really is becoming part of the past. If you truly want to have those kinds of relationships and you want to have those true benefits from it, you have to have, I talk about it as like buying versus renting, right? If you go direct and you hire an influencer, whether you're a brand manager or you work for an agency on behalf of a brand, and you go and hire an influencer, you go through an influence broker. There's a lot of firms that claim to be influencer specialists, but they really just have a email list, right?
Yeah.
And some working relationship, but it's a direct transactional relationship. If you hire them, you will at best get what you paid for. That's the best case scenario, is you get what you paid for. Beyond that, you're not going to get much more. It's thank you, work performed, invoice attached. And what we're creating in our universe, and have been for the last 15 plus years, is an environment where you have that equity in the relationship. And it's something that you can really call upon throughout the year. And we do this through a variety of things, including, as you mentioned, the in-person events that we have.
Right. And I think what you were talking about earlier, like even backing it up again, talking about influencer versus creator. If you're hiring a creator, what does that mean versus hiring an influencer?
I don't want to, we get down to the terminology. I think it comes back to, the mommy blogger versus mom creator versus, there are women in our community who say, don't call me mommy unless I birthed you, right? Like that's a pejorative from an outsider, right?
Yeah,
a mommy blogger is considered a some sort of a derogatory term.
Yes.
But there are others who embrace it. There are others who have it in their brand, and that's okay. There are some who like being an influencer, and there are others who don't want to be associated with what they see as, challenges within the influencer industry of people who are perhaps, and we can get into FTC disclosure in a minute, but not disclosing properly or doing things that
shady.
The
shady
right
side of it.
Every industry, particularly fast-growing industries, will have their challenges and will have their speed bumps. And so, it's really a matter of understanding how to work with that.
But I guess what I mean by that is that co-creating part of like coming up with a campaign with a brand, is that co-creation where I know that you can you can hire somebody and say, here, I need 3, Instagram posts, and I need you to say these things and do this thing and use this imagery. Or you can say, I need to get the authentic way that you would use this brand. Right. So I don't know how you would kind of go for that.
One of the, listening to the influencer and understanding their feedback. And again, this is where folks who take it treat it professionally and understand how to work with brands and see it as a collaborative process. They're fantastic, and they are great to work with. And that tends to be the bulk of our community.
Yes.
And so, but when you're working with a brand, the key is finding that happy medium between making sure that all the key points are hit, all the key messages are hit, making sure that it passes compliance, whatever their industry's compliance is. And some, like pharma and other industries, are incredibly high compliance. So making sure it ticks all those boxes, but doesn't alter the voice of the creator that has been hired to do this. And so there are so many people. One of our common things that we say is, if you buy the voice, don't change the voice. And we see over and over again how there are so many, whatever you will call it, agencies, brands, whatever, who will come in and even sometimes of no fault of their own will just edit it down to where it strips the heart out of it. And we lose the part that they were originally hiring and is going to give them the value that they want.
Yeah, so I think that's so important that you say that, especially whenever you're talking about smaller brands or even say local brands. Let's go all the way down to the local level that might be working with an influencer, a local influencer or something a little bit more micro. I'm going to bring this down a little bit. How would you tell them to go about finding and working with an influencer like that on a local level?
Well, and some of these they're sort of tried and true ways. And one of them is, and you may have heard this before, is look for the people that are already talking about your brand, right? Look for those who are talking about your brand or your category, and engage with them online. And so those, when they're, obviously understand the tags that are being used in your industry and follow those, see who's talking about it. And start a conversation with them. Be a human being. Engage with them. If they're going to be at a public event, or they'll be at or maybe if you're hosting a farmer's market booth or something like that, make sure they know that you're going to be there. Make sure that they know that you'd love to welcome them, and they're anybody they bring with them. And so they want to be recognized, particularly on the local level. If you're dealing with local creators, local influencers. Local is their currency, right? So that's something that is different from your larger national creator, as there's just a different currency, or different type of currency in play.
Yeah, and back in the day, I don't know if you remember the name Dave Sifry, but there used to be a tool called Technorati, which doesn't exist anymore, that would give us an idea of where people sat on the influence scale, sort of a clout thing. But he would talk about the magic middle, those influencers that were not super famous and they weren't, like at the beginning, they're in what he calls the magic middle, which are those people that have really good communities that are around them, but maybe they don't have the most followers or they don't have the most of those things, but they have the most maybe engagement, or, they're around a specific topic, they become sort of an expert, a thought leader. Tell me how you are thinking about that for your, for your influencers, what they're looking for, who they're looking to work with.
It's for the brands that we work with, brands and organizations, because a lot of our clients are public organizations and governmental organizations, things like that. And so it still amazes me how many people will, even though, because you're right, this goes back to a decade or more.
Yeah, that's more than a decade ago.
Of people talking about that powerful middle. And it amazes me how many people still want to pay exorbitant amounts of money to hire celebrity influencers who are, at least in a lot of cases, not really going to move the needle in and of themselves on a campaign.
Unless, of course, that's their area. Of expertise or whatever.
Exactly. There are there are certainly exceptions and fashion, celebrities and things of that nature. There are a ton of really valuable exceptions. What I'm talking about is we want a celebrity on this because we want a celebrity on this.
Right.
And what we end up doing is we spend, when we look at it in terms of a budget, right? We spend an exorbitant and inordinate amount of the budget and time in terms of wrangling, negotiating, rights discussions, following up, dealing with their people and their agents to get things done on time, and going through all of this, and in order to be able to get the content that we need, that in and of itself oftentimes doesn't really fundamentally at the street level move the needle. Now, what we do in those cases, because we work with plenty of celebrity creators and influencers and movie stars and all those things in different projects, but we build an amplification network around them. So we take that core content and we don't rely on that by itself.
Thank you.
And we don't take projects typically that are relying for full KPIs on the work of this one or the words of this one influencer or this one celebrity. So that's something that we have to build this, we have a visual model, and it's this ripple effect of amplification that starts at the celebrity level with this core content, includes original narratives down the chain, and then ends in these local communities and local engagement. So it really touches everyone, and makes the most of that content they're paying so much money for.
So important what you just said, because the idea is that, you're going to hire the celebrity, they're going to put out this one piece of content, and it's going to be everything to everybody. But what you need to do as the brand is then take that content and amplify it, put some ads on it, send it out to other people. Let's just take social media breakfast, for example. If just Jennifer and I are trying to get out the word, it never actually works. It only works when, Gika or, Donna or whoever picks it up and actually amplifies it for us to their audiences, because then they know, or Sandra in the back, who does that all the time. Thank you so much. That's really important for having a community around a brand activation, right?
Yeah.
So you've done that so well. I mean, that's what I think Mom 2.0 does so well.
That's what we do, is that earned amplification within our community is so different. So when you talk about the transactional, get what you pay for, with our environment, in addition to a lot of the other sort of strategic pieces and that guidance that we bring to the table, it's also being able to have that earned amplification through this largest creator community, where we're sharing that out, and other creators are seeing it, they're sharing it out, and you get this kind of 1 + 1 = 3 outcome.
Yeah, I love that so much. And I think that's really important for a smaller brand to understand, because if, and taking social media breakfast again, when we started this almost 15 years ago, people, we're going to be 15 years in May. Jennifer and I sat down. I didn't know anybody in town, but Jennifer, she knew a lot of people, and other people that we knew. Sandra knew a lot of people, and we all sat down together and we collaborated. So even if at the smallest level, you can do collaborations, right?
Yeah, it's if you're a local brand, one of the things that you can do also is, and it depends on how you see yourself relative to your competition.
Yeah.
But you can collaborate with your other, what you would consider competitors, and drive that, drive more interest and conversation around the service that you offer, that you all offer together.
All boats rise.
Right, all boats rise with the rising tide. And so I think that's a really important thing that people don't think about, because we get into this very protective, guarded space as entrepreneurs and as small business owners, and it's easy to feel threatened, particularly by that person who is doing also what you do, and they're doing it really, really well, right? And you just right, and they're your nemesis. But it's like, no, let's build some awareness about what we're doing, to make this something that people are going to be interested in.
Yeah, sometimes that's really hard to see. Whenever you see somebody doing so well, you're like, I've been doing this forever. I've heard people say that I've been doing this forever, and all of a sudden they are getting all of the glory. Well, I think having an ecosystem that builds up together, you're building a market together around a specific, topic or idea. That's great. So I'm going to get into a little bit of the details now. I'm going to ask you a few things, but I want to come to an inflection point, which was 2019, 2020, for mom media, especially. So you have an event business, and all of a sudden there was no events. So
we had an events business.
You had an events business. Okay, great. I mean, you were known, because I've come to some of your events, and let me tell you, these events were very cool to come to. Just a lot of, you felt like an influencer and a star when you walked into one of these events. I went to the one in Miami. I think it was in Miami.
It was a good one.
Yeah, Versace. Anyway, we went to the Versace mansion and walked around and sipped champagne. I mean, I've done some cool things with you. So tell me what happened in 2020, and I have an events business too, so I understand what happened.
So we, and I'll just say, a minute on the sort of theory. You mentioned the environment. We always wanted to create Mom 2.0 Summit as an industry leaders event, which was interesting before the industry existed, right? So, but we said, let's model this after the industry leaders event. And so my career pre all this I was in marketing in financial services, and I saw how their leaders events were very, impeccably designed. And so between Carrie's unbelievable ability to
is
put an event
amazing.
together, and
Hi, Carrie.
Laura's
I don't know if you're watching, but hi.
and Laura's amazing ability to program and create relevant content and draw those those speakers and topics in. So we put all that together. So we had our largest event ever in Austin in 2019. We had about 1,100 people, which was big for us. We typically are around 800. And Google was our title sponsor, and we were on a roll. 2020 was going to be in Los Angeles. It was going to be tremendous. And we were also, and we haven't talked about this a lot, but we were also very close to an acquisition. And we were a 90+% revenue event business. And we were supposed to have our acquisition in late March of 2020. As you can imagine,
terrible timing.
As you can imagine,
I'm so
not
sorry.
only did that go away, but our business was facing, and as the months dragged on, effectively an extinction level event for a business that is primarily built on live events where people come together in large numbers, and experiential marketing and all those things that we thought for a time were never coming back. So we had the other 10, 20% of our business had been on demand, or on request, I should say, content campaigns. So, GSK was a longtime sponsor of ours. We did some content campaign work for them where we were connecting with parents on meningitis B vaccinations and helping to really encourage that movable middle of people who just need more information and, talk to your doctor, and driving a lot of that. And so we leaned into that capability and those things that we had done. And in time, and while we worked in a variety of different areas, we really became specialists in what I would call high compliance influencer marketing campaigns. So pharma, government,
Healthcare.
things, any healthcare, HIPAA, anything that relates to where that industry will have a high set of criteria, which also translates to just a lot of big brands who have a lot of their own criteria as well. Just that's
compliance inside. They all have compliance.
Internal
departments.
compliance. For people that have to review everything.
Right.
So we built that up, and we pivoted as fast as we could, very, very quickly. And all of this culminated in, we were selected as the lead influencer firm for the White House COVID-19 pediatric vaccine outreach for both 2021 and 2022. Not an
easy thing.
No, it was all 50 states. It was the outreach for the pediatric COVID-19 vaccine. And for us, it was an application of skills, but it was also an incredible learning environment on a stage and scale that nobody had before, right? And so we were able to go with this topic that was not only of great importance, right, but it was also highly contentious. And you go out into the internet with this, right? We're not even talking about adult vaccines. We're talking about pediatric vaccines.
Yes.
And so going out into the internet with this and having creators and influencers who were willing to talk about
put their name on it.
And what ultimately our approach was, and we insisted on this, our approach was very measured. It was, listen, here are the facts, talk to your doctor, make the best decision for your family, right? That was essentially the through line of the messaging. And we went out with that, and it ultimately, our campaign had the #1 reach days of both 2021 and 2022 of the entire effort that the government was doing. And you talk about celebrities, the number 3, I should say, number 2 in 2021 was President Obama's big day. He had a big promotional day around this, former President Obama. And again, at a celebrity level, it hit big numbers. But when we look at sentiment, and that's another thing that we're tracking as well, what celebrities bring is a great mix of sentiment responses. So you get a lot of negative responses as well from people saying, and we had that with the celebrities we worked with. We worked with Roland and America Ferrera on these campaigns. And we found that while there was a lot of positive engagement, their audience is so varied among the general public that you stir up a lot of sand.
We are having issues with the mics today for some reason. I don't know. Sorry, guys.
Sorry, I'm just blowing them out.
Yeah, your information is so hot.
So hot.
It's so hot. It's taking it over. Awesome. Is that working?
Better? Awesome.
All right. I don't know. We'll see what's up. Okay, cool. So that being said, as you talk about that kind of thing, you were talking to me about your targeting for that was
Yeah.
just not, you're not trying to get everybody.
No, we're not trying to get everybody. And no, we really were just, our approach was in a way hard to argue with, in the sense of, hey, get the facts, get the science from wherever, from a variety of sources, talk to your doctor, talk to somebody you trust that's a medical, healthcare professional. And that approach, well, I mean, listen, there were people who were opposed to that too, and that's fine. But it got people talking, and it got people talking to their doctors. And so we were able to adjust that. But talking about compliance, we had not only the governmental level compliance, right, dealing with the White House and Department of Health and Human Services, but also the pharma level compliance, right? And there was a lot of moving targets at that time. So we came through that, and kind of the longer question was, tell where we've been over the last few years. And then after that, events came back online in late 22. We had our first Mom 2.0 summit in LA. We returned semi-triumphantly to LA and had an event there. And then our next event was, our 2023 event was earlier this year in Scottsdale. There's a Hulu docuseries called Mom Talk. There's an episode called Mom Talk. It's their Nightline collaboration. Check it out. They featured Mom 2.0 there. Again, looking at the evolution of the industry, some of the challenges, and where the real professionals are going to get their education and connections. And so we had that. We had about 750 people there, so about our normal numbers.
Very good numbers.
And there were over 73 million people watching online.
Fantastic.
Yeah, it was.
That's
tremendous.
How many we have watching online too, right? Okay, let me know. Okay, good.
Leave it in the comments. And then in May, I guess to sort of bring it to current, in May we were acquired.
Yes, I know. I'm so excited for you.
Exactly.
Really.
Finally, we were acquired by Ziff Davis, which actually owns Everyday Health Group, and we're part of their Everyday Health Group pregnancy and parenting division now. So we have Baby Center and What to Expect and other very well-known brands.
Yes.
And so we are the influencer creator arm of that. Yeah. It's a tremendous company, and we reach 9 out of 10 expecting moms in the United States, and 75% of those register with us.
That's amazing. Yeah, congratulations to Ziff for getting you guys, because you have such a great mind share, and they kept you too. So you didn't just sell it and move to the Bahamas. You're working hard.
No, that's what's exciting, is the opportunity to really bring these capabilities to that environment and to those iconic brands, and it's great.
No, I mean, it's fantastic. And so you spend some of your time in Houston and New York now. So tell me how that's looking for your career.
So we're we were thankfully able to stay in Houston. We love it's our hometown. We love being in Houston, but our offices are in New York, and so we're there. I'm there probably a third of my time. So it's busy, but we're able to what's great about a company like Ziff is that it's made so many acquisitions over the years. It's a company known for growing by acquisition. So with that, there is, I think, in the DNA, a spirit of self-motivated entrepreneurialism or intrapreneurialism, because that's who makes up the company. The building blocks of the larger company are these entrepreneurs, right? And drivers and self-motivators. So for remote work, right, as a company that's a large company, publicly traded company that has, quite a bit of remote workers, it really does work, because it's, the people are motivated and know how to get it done.
Yeah. I mean, some of us could never imagine stepping in and, an office all the time, as part of who we are, just DNA. Even though we can do it. We can come to the office. Don't worry.
Yeah, if you're listening, we can do it.
If you're listening, we will come to your office. We will work for you. No problem. So I want to talk a little bit about just the nuts and bolts of doing this. So if somebody's thinking about, I want to work with an influencer, or I am an influencer, or I want to like grow my thought leadership, there's a couple of things, and you talk about compliance all the time. So let's talk about the rules of the road. So if you are working with an influencer, what are like a couple of things you need to keep in mind that are very important, and that you can bring in the FTC regulations here as we talk about that. But what are the things that a brand needs to think of, or a business, whenever they start working with influencers?
Well, first is do your diligence, right? So do your diligence, do your vetting. Don't, ultimately and a lot of times there's either a brand manager or oftentimes both, a brand manager on the client side, as well as an agency involved in some capacity. There needs to be, I believe, because everybody has different perspectives, more than one set of eyeballs on the historical content of that creator. So we will go through it and we will do vetting. And we have people now at this point, we have vetted rosters of influencers that have been vetted by the White House and by, on these really, really high compliance campaigns and run really clean and efficient businesses. But look at that historical content, understand how they're positioning brands relative to their own narrative, right? Because and that runs the spectrum. So you may not mind if it is integrated in their personal narrative that is a little racy. You may not mind that. That may be okay, but it may not. You may also mind or not mind if they exclude it from their narrative, right? So it is kind of a commercial break. They'll talk about their fashion and beauty and tech, and now here's a word from, and it's basically an ad read or, something of that nature. Just a sort of a disembodied promotion that's not woven into their own experience.
Correct.
Right. Yeah. And sometimes that's okay with brands. It's not okay with us. We like it to be integrated and thoughtful. Exactly. Yeah. And relevant. But understand how it's integrated. That goes for podcasts. As we do more and more podcast integrations, just simple ad reads are not moving the needle. And so not in any way close to integrated stories. And so particularly multi-episode or, type of integrations. Yes. Where you can have, say a 3-episode arc with a thematic that ties back to whatever the brand messaging is. So, I'll give you an example of how we integrated a brand, and this was at an event, but so this was when Google was title sponsor at Mom 2.0 in Austin, I mentioned a minute ago. So they had several pillars of online safety that they were promoting, and it was kindness and courage and things of that nature. And so we built our entire main stage programming around these very broad topics. And so, or at least we set it up in a way that would align with them, right? So for our courage segment, someone came out on stage who was a member of our community, was a family of immigrants, told their family story. It was incredibly powerful. It was part of her narrative. And that was the courage moment to open the courage segment. And then she introduced Brene Brown, who spoke, right? And so, and it wasn't
can't get bigger than that.
So it was, again, there was no shilling, right? There was no tap dancing for Google, but it was aligning the content that was important and relevant
to their pillars.
To their pillars, exactly, in a way that was integrated and thoughtful. Yeah.
No, I love that. Just to give like an example too, that I saw recently, there's this guy on YouTube. He calls himself the criminal lawyer. He's cute. Anyway, he looks at body cam from police and comments on them. And his sponsor is eFile or e-contracts or eFile or whatever. And he always says, what if you find yourself in a situation where you're like, you've been caught by the police and now you need to sign a contract, and he brings in eFile. So I think those kinds of connections it's funny, it's cute, and it's also part of the brand.
That's right.
It's like, here's how you can use this and why it matters to what I'm talking about.
That's right. I think we all can think of a YouTuber or a podcast or something where they integrate it beautifully, right? And others where you're just like, oh, fast forward, please. So
yeah, I've seen some of those too, where they're really seriously into something and then they stop. They're like, and here's our, and you're like, oh my gosh, this is like.
Or the conversation
jarring.
Just literally stops, right?
Yeah,
it's like they just press pause, and then suddenly it's an ad read, and then they press play again, right? And that's just super weird. So
yeah, so thinking about how you can do that. Yeah, if you're listening to this too, if you're an influencer, this is this is like a guy who knows what he's talking about. So there you go. What about FTC compliance? There is some compliance for influencers and creators as well. Can you, and the brand, unfortunately, is the one who's held responsible for it. So
Right.
how does that work, those rules?
Yeah, it's so the FTC just revised the guidelines. They were announced in, I believe, June or July of this past summer. And shockingly, there had been no revisions, no updates since 2009.
Yeah, it's a long time.
Long time ago, right? I mean, there was in this industry, the dinosaurs were walking the earth, and it was a completely different world. And so
true.
today they're trying to catch up. As with a lot of industries, they're trying to catch up because anytime quote unquote expert or influential people are helping folks part with their money, the government wants to have a say in protecting that, right? So in my background in financial services, where I first began my career in marketing and financial services, there was a lot of that where, I mean, there was the Wild West days of financial services where, a stockbroker could own the stock and recommend that everybody buy it. And then, he could take a position counter to that, and, or she could take it. And so that, again, industry regulations are always keeping up with that and to try to get rid of those bad apples or eliminate those situations. And so they updated it. I think there's a lot. I will say the FAQ alone is 40 pages for the new updates.
Wow.
So it is tremendous. Read it, and do your best. Break it up into different chunks. But it's a lot. But the key change now is, if there's a couple of differences that I'll say. One is the words clear and conspicuous are repeated over and over again in terms of the disclosure, because a lot of the hashtag ad, hashtag sponsored sort of integration is being hidden, or it's been put in the description or the comments, comment number one, this was a sponsored ad. That's not good enough anymore. That is not kosher anymore. That does not work. We're not doing that. It has to be visible. It has to be conspicuous. There is what they've applied, which I think is interesting, and so which still leaves room for interpretation, is this kind of reasonable person standard, which you also see in finance a lot, right? Like, would a reasonable person believe that this was a true legitimate endorsement, or would they clearly understand that it was a paid partnership?
Right.
And so there is a lot of that. The other difference is, just if you're a brand manager or you work at an agency, is that your liability is going up.
Yes.
So
that's really important to know.
If you touch it at any point along the way, your liability goes up. So for those that are working in agencies on behalf of brands, you have liability in this beyond just the brand manager. If somebody's an influence broker and is really just kind of powering that transactional introduction, watch out, because now your job just got a lot busier. So the fines are, we talk about the fines. The fines can be up to a little over $50,000 per incident, but that's not for most big brands, that's not the reputational hit. It's the reputational hit. Even if you can afford the cost, you can't afford the reputational hit.
Yeah, and smaller brands can't afford that reputation.
Right. Because those are the stories that will be covered, right? Those are the stories, the person that didn't disclose, particularly if it's on behalf of a big brand or a big initiative, those are the salacious stories that are going to get picked up in the media.
Right. And that's absolutely true. So look for those FTC guidelines. Definitely, if somebody can see them in the chat, if you go out and search for them, put them in the chat for the link. It's very easy, just FTC guidelines.
And I can provide some links afterwards.
Yeah, that'd be great. And we'll put it, and we'll share them out. That'd be great. So that's really important. I think the next thing that's really kind of a struggle right now for influencers is, believe it or not, AI, because who owns it? Who doesn't own it? How does that work? I've been hearing all kinds of things, and I don't think it's set yet. I just want to know what your thought is on how you're going to work on that in your contracts with your influencers. Are you putting it in your contracts? Yeah, we are creating an AI policy. We need something. Obviously, we want something that's going to be legally robust. And so as a big organization, we want to make sure that that's sound and defensible. But yeah, our informal policy is that we understand AI is here. We understand it's not going anywhere. We know that it's of value to certain creators and writers, to
actually a broad swath of creators and writers across a lot of different industries. As a sort of, if you think of it in terms of like a sous chef for your content, if it's being used in a capacity to help people organize their thoughts or to organize their content into different sections, things like that, from a very base level, our policy is that we want original narratives, original stories told in an original and authentic way. That needs to be the output. And we are checking that against AI. If it's an AI written article, then we won't accept it. And that could violate the terms of the agreement, and
right, it's in the agreement, so you've said
exactly,
what you're right.
exactly. It could impact compensation. We'd probably never work with that person again. So we don't want things that are written by AI, but we would be lying to ourselves and everybody in this room if we said that AI isn't being used as a starter dough for content.
Yes.
And if it's used appropriately within those standards that we're setting, then I'm okay with that.
Yeah, I think that's really important. And there's a lot of like things that are going through court right now. I know that there was some people that sued Midjourney, some artists that sued Midjourney and Stable Diffusion for artwork that they said was being trained with their personal artwork. And they actually did not win on the point of copyright because they didn't take their materials and copyright them with the Copyright Office. So one of the things I would say to creators is if you are creating things that are absolutely yours, consider getting them copyrighted, which is something before we really didn't have to do because we're like, automatically it's copyrighted supposedly, right?
Right.
But that's not working.
But that's not,
apparently
no,
in the court
that does not work in a court of law. Yeah, or if it does, it costs a lot more in legal fees to make that case, right? Without having that clear copyright that's been noted.
So that's one thing I would just say to creators off the
I would
the
say
bat.
to brands also, have an AI policy, brands and agencies, have an AI policy that you can, even just on a quick basis in a call with a firm like ours, just to make sure it aligns, right? Because if your policy is
no AI,
that's okay. I mean, we need to know that going in because we'll have to modify our agreements to take out our AI policy. If we think it makes it, no, we'll talk through it. But if that is your firm policy, and I can think of a few legal scenarios where that would be important, then for clients, then in that case, that's okay. Let's just make sure, but we want to make sure we're aligned on that.
Yeah, no, that's very fair. I'm going to go ahead and open up to questions to the audience. If you have questions for John, he has been through all kinds of these things. So if you have any questions when it comes to this kind of information, I believe John is like the perfect person to tell you. And I'm so grateful that you're here, by the way. I really appreciate it. But while we're waiting for the questions to roll in, and Tori will do it online. And then if anybody has someone in the room, just raise your hand and I'll call on you. There's one more thing that I want to make sure that we talk about, and that's just how in general things have changed over the years. And I talked about pricing in my thing. So pricing is one of them. So what are you doing to set pricing for influencers that you hire? Do you have tell me a little bit about your how you do that?
I would say that pricing and normalization of pricing, standardization of pricing is probably one of the great ongoing challenges of this industry because there's very little unification in terms of pricing standards. Having said that, I mean, you can go online and find price charts, right? Mega, micro influencer, nano influencer, mega celebrity. And those can be instructive. And I would say that a lot of those align with how we work in terms of our basic pricing, but it always depends, really. When somebody's going out, if, for example, they're going out and they're talking about a pediatric vaccine, right? Or something that they know is a lightning rod topic, that they're going to really have to be engaged in that discussion and really be up to speed on how to respond to those. And maybe in certain pharma cases, we have things that the reporting requirements. We have if anybody, well, anyway, bottom line is there's a lot of reporting requirements. I'm getting into the weeds, but if and it requires an incredible always on degree of vigilance on the part of the influencer who, after they post their content,
they can't just walk out.
They can't just, and not that they would post and ghost anyway, but they have to look for specific types of public feedback that they then have to report per the FDA requirements. And so it's very, very involved. So again, that may
That's more time. It's
that's
like
more time, it's more
yeah.
work, so the standard pricing isn't going to apply. I would also say that, and this is something that we've really tried to work with our clients on, is at certain times, be ready for what I call it surge pricing, like with Uber. There are times where certain groups are busier than other times of year. And so, you know, the deals or the holiday people, like right now, we can't, they're available in January, right? The successful ones, but they're booked through the end of the year. And if you are able to get them to post something, it's going to cost a lot more. And we've had different things, you know, and there's different situations. Some of it's situational, but the point is that there are, and we walk our clients through that if it's relevant, that we may encounter surge pricing. But we've had that happen to us where we didn't expect it, where we had built a campaign, priced in the influencers at a reasonable rate, and then you know, world events happened that then created surges in pricing, and we had to kind of go back to the drawing board. So.
Yeah, really interesting. And I think that, you know, if you are a smaller brand, like a local brand, we were talking before, you may be able to find a local influencer that will work with you on your budget, whatever that is. But remember, it's like you're hiring a contractor to do content for your brand. I mean, how much would you pay them to come in and do something for you, put something together, a campaign or whatever? I mean, it's going out on their channels, but it also should be going out on your channels as well, right?
And if it's a smaller brand, I mean, any brand, but particularly if it's an owner-operated brand, I love that example of having a contractor come into your home, because that's exactly how you would treat it. They would come to your home, you'd show them the room you want redone or the bathroom whatever it is, and you would give them your vision. They will give you their professional feedback if they're worth their price. That is based on experience, and you will have a conversation. You'll come to an agreement. They will produce the work. You will have a punch list, right?
Right.
And if you know, which is your feedback, or you know, feedback on how to engage from there with the audience. It is a partnership, right? Even, I mean, especially in that scenario. So go back to the idea of having that that sort of guild of people in your industry and being able to have influencer relationships at a guild or community level, and then maybe kind of creating ambassadorships or something where they can make it, again, local is their currency. If they are part of that relationship, then they can get maybe special access within this community of businesses.
It's kind of like being invited to a VIP event, which is what
or
where you
being
came from,
exactly. So I would recommend thinking along those lines, less about I'm an individual, I need to go hire this person. You know, that's still going to end up being much more transactional.
No, I agree. And then you have that longer thing. So one of the things I like to say is that community is the killer app, because one of the things people are complaining about are all the algorithms changing. And, you know, even with, I mean, I talk to influencers every day and they're very worried about, say, the Instagram algorithm, you know, getting shut down for a week because you commented too fast or something like that. So there's a lot of things, especially in the next year because of the upcoming elections, that I feel like that the influencers are suffering under, I guess is the best way to put it. And so how do we kind of address that? And how do brands, how can they get what they need when the influencers like fighting against those algorithms too?
Well, I mean, the influencers are a couple of things to remember if you're a brand or agency working with an influencer, particularly a parenting influencer who have that whole layer of, you know, managing a family and running a business from home typically, is that they don't have a team. You may have a team, you may have somebody that does video, somebody that does SEO, someone that does editing, they're content writing. They're doing all of that typically. They might have a person or two, but they're doing all of that. So there's a lot of time constraints on their part. They're not just sitting around waiting for the next thing, at least not if they're, you know, the kind of person you want to work with. So understanding their world and understanding what impacts them, and the fact that they're always, it's the same thing, in fact, that a lot of broadcast news and broadcast TV is. They have a 24-hour or 365 at least content cycle that they have to produce. They're always producing content, whatever their audience expects, whether it's daily content, weekly content, whatever. they have to produce this. So they're always thinking in terms of that. They're always on that hamster wheel, and it can be exhausting. So understand them. I would just take a moment to say that.
Mhm.
But the algorithm piece is really important, because these are people who, if you look at the vast majority of them, had a job, a day job. They started doing this. It became successful. It got successful to the point where they left their day job. And then at that point, sometimes it gets successful to the point where they invest in an office and their spouse leaves his or her job to come to work with them on it. And, you know, they hire people. And so there's a lot invested in this. And so if Instagram changes the algorithm, if they're 100% on Instagram and Instagram changes the algorithm, that you could shut the doors sometimes. I mean, we all remember the cautionary tale of Vine, right?
Oh,
Vine,
yeah.
it was,
Oh, gosh.
we had people
Yeah.
in our community who were supporting their families with content on Vine, and Twitter bought Vine and they shut it down overnight. And there were people that went from a very healthy income to no income. And so where I mentioned earlier that when we started, you know, the bell curve was sort of like Gen X mom bloggers. Today, it's we have a large community that spans generations. We work with, you know, baby formula companies to AARP, but the sort of top of the bell curve are young millennial multi-platformers, right? People that are on multiple platforms. But one of the trends we're seeing is a return to, I wouldn't call it a return to blogging necessarily, because we think of blogging in the old school term, but a return to website content ownership, right? Where you have a hub and then that allows you to do other things, that allows other monetization. You know, influencers are thinking, they're a lot of influencers. I won't put this in everyone's mouth, but a lot of influencers are thinking, because we have these conversations, that this could end any day, right? Like whatever made me famous, or if I get burned out on content, or the algorithm changes, so they're looking at a lot of other things. So they're launching their own products, right? You see this. They're launching their own online stores. They're creating content on their websites.
They got merch.
They have merch. They have online events. They have classes. So yeah.
Yeah, and education, and there's so much. So is there any questions out on the stream that we can answer? And yep, okay, so we'll have one here.
Have you had any pushback after some of the recent controversies like the Utah mom?
Oh yeah.
So interesting.
That was one of my questions too.
Yeah, no. So interestingly, that the Hulu docuseries starts, not the most recent Utah mom, but another group of the original Mom Talk controversy. It interviews those several of those women that were involved in that, and looks at how that came to be. Right. It ultimately takes the tack of, here's the problem and here's the solution. And fortunately, we're on the solution side. It's when an industry gets to a point where it is at this size, both in terms of numbers of people and the amount of money. You're going to have human problems and you're going to have financial problems. I mean, this person could have been a doctor, a nurse, when you have a trusted person, I think anytime in any industry, and you can think of that, it's a police officer, a nurse, whatever, who does something horrific, it grabs people's attention, right? And because it's so contrary to what that person was known for in their community. In this case, the community is online and it's larger, and it's, there's money involved in that as well, potentially. So it's obviously terrible. I would go back to, again, sort of the arc of the Hulu docuseries, which was, there are problems, but the solution is understanding best practices, networking with good folks, and having a process and partners like us that can help you really weed through that.
Yeah, I think that's really important. And one of the things that I was going to say about that too is that, some of the controversy is, can I put my child onto a live stream and live stream their life? And should I be doing that, or should we be doing that? So there could be, in my mind, there could be some things coming up like the FTC. I don't know if they would do that, but I don't know who would do that, but there could be some limits on that. Labor, maybe, labor would do that. I don't know.
I mean, the issue of, do you have your kids as a part of the content? That is something that is
money.
Yeah. I mean, there are family businesses. I came from an immigrant family, and that was built on family businesses. You know, if you could reach the counter, you worked in the store, kind of thing. But I'm not saying that's the way it should go necessarily. But there's a lot of families who are like, hey, we're all in this together, and I would say that but this is a little different because you're dealing with children who are really not of an age where they have any agency, right? To be able to say, I want to be in this content, babies and toddlers and littles and grade school age. And so that I think is a challenge right now that the industry as a whole has not addressed. But because there's also been some great examples of really lovely content and really successfully executed content. I would just say that I'll just give a quick example. There's a dad influencer, and I watched a beautiful video from him the other day about how he's been a part of our Dad 2.0 community. His channel is Belief in Fatherhood. Glenn Henry is his name, and he deleted half of his YouTube videos, and he's a tremendous YouTuber, but he deleted half of his YouTube videos, around 400, because his kids asked him to. His kids got to a certain age and said,
I don't want that out there.
I don't want that out there. I'm not comfortable with it. And he said, and this is their family business. And he said, okay. And so it's that kind of respect and courage to be able to say, and I say courage in the face of this is how we're feeding our family, right?
Correct.
To make that right decision and respect your kids' wishes.
No, I love that so much. And I think that that's definitely where it's at too. And there's a difference between streaming all the time and then also, having like vignette content around a specific thing.
Right.
So I'll leave it at that because there's so much there. And honestly, I think it'll get litigated before we're done.
I agree.
Cool. Any other questions? Okay. No questions there. What about in the room here? Anything you've ever wondered how to work? Like, do you want to be an influencer? Have you ever thought about that? What does that mean? So what does that mean? Like, if you want to be an influencer and you want to start doing that kind of content, what would you recommend?
I think if you want to be an influencer and you're, it's, but and you're not an authority on anything, right? I think that leads down to a path of the wrong kinds of influencers that make creators shudder when they hear the term, right? Yes. So I don't encourage people who say, I want to be an influencer to pursue that, because if you don't have a real heart or expertise for what you're talking about, also the burnout comes really, really fast, because people
it takes more than you think.
People just don't realize how hard it is to create this content. And particularly when you're under the pressure of a brand partnership and the expectations and those teams and the agencies working with you, it elevates the stakes a lot. And if you started and you were just having fun with it, understand as you get bigger that those responsibilities and those pressures can become pretty intense. So leave room for yourself, leave room for your family, and it can all be manageable.
That's wonderful. That's a great ending. Thank you so much. Give him a hand for coming and speaking with us today. I really appreciate you coming, John. And definitely I'm excited for the new chapter for Mom Media. And I'm going to be obviously watching and keeping in touch. But thanks so much for sharing your wisdom with us today.
Thanks for
Take
having
care.
me.
Bye.